Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me Adam the Cosplayer, who I'm very excited to speak with. So, welcome to the show, because I wanted to do this since I think March.
Yeah, it's been a while. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited because I love speaking with male cosplayers. You were speaking briefly before. Male cosplayers don't come on, and I love talking with male cosplayers and cosplayers in general. And so I think that's the best place to start. Is how did you get into cosplay? Because everybody has an interesting story.
Sure. I think where mine started as a child, I was always into Halloween, and I was wondering, like, why can't we dress up more than just one day out of the year? Like, why can't this just be like normal everyday life? And then fast forward to, I think it was about 2010. I went to a Comic-Con in El Paso, which wasn't, in hindsight, wasn't that great, but at the time I thought it was a good con because I'd never really been to one before. And I went as Wolverine. I heard it was a very simple cosplay, just like jeans, the tank top and then the claws. And then I did something with my hair. Back then I had more hair. And so, that was it. But I loved it. And I was like, this is like my kind of scene. And so then I started going to cons more regularly. My wife and I started creating pretty elaborate costumes for Halloween. We started getting into the actual art of creating costumes instead of just buying everything. And there's nothing wrong with buying things too. It's whatever works for the cosplayer. I don't try to judge, whether someone made it or not. It's just about having fun. And so for me now, what really has gotten me to this point is that I really enjoy making things, particularly out of like foam. I'm big into EVA foam right now, and so I want to just continue with that and grow my skills.
And so let's break this down a little bit. Sure. Because obviously I love talking inside baseball with a lot of things, and cosplay is one of the things that's super interesting. So where do your ideas come from? Because you've done a bunch of stuff from DC, you've done some stuff from Marvel. So
it's really just characters I like. I go like the Punisher is one of my favorite comic book characters, and one that has sort of, unfortunately, like a slightly tainted reputation because of all the misuse of the Punisher, within the last 10, 15 years, the symbol and everything. But really, what the character stands for is fighting a system that doesn't work, one that's broken. And so that character always stood out to me. So I said, okay, I want to cosplay as the Punisher. So I have these various versions of the Punisher that I like from the, let's see, what is his name? The Chiquetto version, the drawing with instead of the traditional logo, it has more like two of the teeth coming down. The Rucka version of that. Chiquetto was the artist. But then I also like the Netflix style one, the one that oh God, I'm drawing a blank here. Who's the guy who played him in the Netflix version? It was Bernthal, John Bernthal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So really, I just find characters I like. Right now, I'm focused on some Star Wars stuff. I wanted to do a bounty hunter, but I wanted to do something that is pretty unique, and I'm still working on it. It's one that's not ready yet. But I thought, well, I want to be an alien, and what's a recognizable alien? So I looked at the Twi'lek species, the ones that have the little, I don't know what you call them, leku, I think they're called, that dangle from the back of their neck. So I actually thought, okay, I'm going to build this. It's out of latex, and it went horribly. It's not an easy build. So I ended up finding this guy in South America, actually, who makes them. And so I commissioned that to get from him, and I'm building everything else. But I wanted to get those. Anyway, I kind of ramble on this, but my point is that I choose characters that are unique, but also exciting to me, and they sort of inspire me to work harder on the cosplay.
And so to go off of that point, because you just mentioned a bunch of stuff that how do you go about finding materials is a big thing, because obviously you build a bunch of your cosplays now. Obviously commissioning something out is very interesting as well, because there's a whole set of rules, and not rules from the cosplay community, but rules that you have to figure out how to commission it, what to buy, what you actually need commissioned out versus what you can do yourself. Also, measurements are big when you're commissioning things out.
Sure.
People being reputable, and also balancing costs with it and making sure that it actually works. Because if you're dropping some serious money on a commissioned out piece, you don't want it to not work with what you're doing. And also saying, hey, who does this work? Because I don't know how many people do this characters, I guess, tentacles / hair / whatever those things are called in Star Wars. I don't know how many people actually do that, and I don't know how many people are very good at it as well.
Sure.
So how do you find people to do that? How do you find materials, and how do you balance the entire cost of this? Because it can get very expensive very quickly.
They can, and so there's a lot to cover there, but I'll start with cost. The way I keep my costs down is I don't do a lot of cosplays. I make about 2 or 3 a year on a good year, and some of them are less expensive. They don't require a lot of materials or a lot of purchasing. And some are more elaborate, like the Star Wars Bounty Hunter. The Leku itself, the headpiece was like $100 and something bucks. And I found this guy on Etsy. And another thing you talk about, well, how do you do this? How do you find someone to commission? It's a lot of research. It's just like anything else. You got to put in, a couple of hours at least, just going down the rabbit hole of finding who makes these things, reading reviews, seeing like the images, seeing like what you think is going to work for you, and then hoping. Really, a lot of it is just hoping it works out. That's an element of it. But to reduce some of that, I try to make as much as possible, because then I'm in charge of the quality and if it's going to work for my cost. As far as some of the items go, it depends on what you're looking for, but like for EVA foam, a lot of that you just find, I think on Amazon you can get some. There's a lot of places you can get it. I try to go to Michael's. Actually, Michael's had a really cool section for cosplayers. It had foam, it had like all sorts of tools and unique stuff. And I was like, oh, this is great. They're finally making cosplay a little more mainstream. And then I went there about a couple months ago and it was gone. So I guess it wasn't selling well, which is kind of disappointing. But anyway, there are places to go. You just gotta be vigilant and looking for it. And trusting a lot of stuff you're going to get online when you don't know the quality of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's horror stories. And I'm sure COVID hasn't helped in some regards either, because I don't know if you know this, but in the comic world, there are countries that for all of 2020 were actually shut down and you couldn't ship into them. And then I've done a lot of international cosplayers, and like there were stories in Australia where they were not having foam and that things weren't happening, and finding materials was a nightmare. And so obviously there were things in the UK that were like that as well. And so how has that been with COVID and even finding materials and balancing all that stuff? Because in the US, I think it was a little bit different, where I don't think it was as bad as Australia or the UK was as far as finding materials.
Yeah, I don't recall any problems getting materials necessarily. If anything, like I was talking with you earlier before we started, was the only impact COVID had on me in terms of cosplaying was it was tough. COVID, the pandemic, even though it's winding down, still like took a toll, I think, on my mental health for a while. And I just didn't feel inspired. I didn't feel like doing anything. Watching TV was like a regular activity for me. And so being creative, like I was prior to the pandemic, it definitely had its peaks and valleys. And now things are stabilizing a little more and cons are coming back. I'm a little more inspired to jump in and work on some of these projects that I have.
And so let's dive into some of this stuff here, because obviously I'm a DC guy. I love DC. I grew up reading DC, and you have a few DC cosplays out there. And so you have Batman, and not a Batman cosplay, but Scarecrow from Batman, from the
Yeah.
entire Christopher Nolan stuff. And I like it because you got the stack, obviously the tie, it's Jonathan Crane. I like the rope around Scarecrow's neck. It's a very nice touch. And so what was the inspiration for this cosplay? Because that Scarecrow is very different than the comic Scarecrow, and it's arguably the best Scarecrow that's ever been on television.
Sure. I love the Nolan trilogy. Dark Knight Rises is not my favorite, but I still enjoy what the trilogy does. As far as choosing that Scarecrow, I always liked that character. I thought he was interesting. I used to watch the Batman animated series, and he was always a fascinating character. And so when I thought of, well, how can I bring to life a character that I enjoyed, but I'm also, at the time when I made this, I had to be realistic about my skills. Because really all I made for that was the cowl, the mask. And so, I bought the materials and I put it together, and I think it came out as good as it could at the time. I think I can do better now since, this was like 8 years ago or whatever. But my point is that when choosing cosplays, I always pick something that's maybe either slightly above my skill level or at my skill level. I know a lot of people like to challenge themselves and jump into really big projects, but I always take on something that I think is realistic for myself. I kind of know my limits, and I know what I can do, and I know what I can't do and what I need to improve on. For example, post-apocalyptic Waldo, that was a original creation. I had this idea of, what if I take Waldo and throw him into like Mad Max and see what he looks like? And at the time, I knew, okay, the best thing I can do right now is damaged foam, because you don't have to have a precise hand with it. You don't have to have expensive tools. You can just have fun with it. So I made the shield, I made an axe, I made a staff, and it really came out the way I wanted it to, because it was within my skill set. I'm not saying to never go above your skill set, but I'm saying understand your skill set. Yeah.
So give me 1 second. I'm going to turn on a light so people can actually see this. Give me like 1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
Because it's about to get dark, everybody. So I live on the East Coast.
New Mexico. Woo!
So yeah, so now everybody can see me a lot better. 13 minutes in, I wanted everybody to understand my dark, brooding personality. So anyhow, let's talk about post-apocalyptic Waldo, because he definitely wants to be found.
Yeah, so, he's ready for a fight, for sure.
So where did that idea even come from? Because it's sort of funny to some degree when you do something like this, and obviously everybody knows who Waldo is to some degree, and obviously you find Waldo in all those books, but then you take that and you make it post-apocalyptical, you make it, end of the world and all that stuff, and obviously you described the cosplay, but I love it. It's a mashup to some degree.
Thank you. Yeah. At the time, I can't remember exactly like how I came up with the idea, but I know that I wanted to do something unique. And one thing that I've seen other cosplayers do is they do a mashup, right? It's not uncommon to do, like, for example, like a pinup style Poison Ivy. My wife Nicole did that at one point, and it was taking a genre and blending it with a character, and then creating this new piece of art. And so when I was thinking about Waldo, I think I saw like a Waldo costume in a Spirit Halloween shop one year. And I was thinking like, it's pretty basic. What if we did something to this, And at the time, I'm trying to remember, was that like right, maybe after Mad Max, a year or two, the Fury Road, I was like, well, all right, post-apocalyptic is a huge genre, or style, I guess you'd say. And so let's take that and apply it to Waldo, and what kind of fun could we have with this? And the cool thing about post-apocalyptic styling is that you sort of tell a story with everything that's going on. Like you imagine Waldo finding these pieces along his journey, wherever he's going, and then applying them to himself. So that was sort of my inspiration.
And obviously, you said something very interesting where obviously at this level that you built this, your skill level was at a certain level. And with foam, you don't have to be exact. Obviously, you expect that Waldo's be torn up, and you don't expect Waldo's clothing and what he's wearing and all the stuff being put together post-apocalyptic to not be perfect.
Yes.
And so what is that like? Because it is interesting when you're like, hey, I know my skill level and I know what I can and can't do. And obviously it is very important to know that. And I'm not saying don't challenge yourself. I'm saying don't grow, but it can be very
I agree.
Bigger projects, especially when you're pumping money into that.
I agree. You know what the beautiful thing about post-apocalyptic style when you apply it to a character that you're cosplaying is it's very forgiving. If you make a mistake, that can look like it was done on purpose. Like if you accidentally cut a piece of your foam and you're like, oh crap, I just ruined this. You're like, well, no, you didn't. It's post-apocalyptic. You can have all sorts of dings and dents, and the paint jobs don't have to be perfect, you know? Whereas something I did before, one of my first cosplays when I started my Instagram page was I made a vest for the Netflix version of Punisher. And that was for 2018 Comic-Con and in San Diego. And with that, I actually had to be very exact. And it was my first piece of foam work. And for what I did, I think it turned out all right. But that was not forgiving because it wasn't supposed to look all tattered and ragged, at least in that regard. The shape needed to have, it needed to look like it was fabricated in a factory or something. So it had to have a bunch of straight lines. It had to be glued just right. And to take that on as my first project, in hindsight, I was probably a little, I think it was a bit above my pay grade, really. I don't think I was able to make it as clean as I wanted to, whereas now I can probably get a little more exact. But again, post-apocalyptic style, you can have mistakes and it's forgiving.
Yeah. And to even go further and talk about foam, foam is a lot lighter than Warbler and some other things out there. And it's also a lot more flexible. It's a lot more breathable. And I think it, in many ways, can be cheaper at the same time as well. And so obviously, what is that like when you're wearing a foam item versus something that is a Warbler chest piece? Because Warbler chest pieces can be very restricting and very tiring. And there are people who can't sit down at conventions because they have Warbler on that. And it's a trend that's changing in cosplay right now in a lot of ways, where people are saying, hey, I want to be a little bit more comfortable and I'm willing to give up a little bit of being 100% authentic to actually be able to sit down.
So the funny thing about this is two things. One, I've never made anything out of Warbler. I had an opportunity to, and it seemed expensive, and it seemed like it was something I wasn't comfortable working on yet for that amount of money. So I didn't go that route. But I know a lot of cosplayers do some really cool stuff with Warbler, like some of the big ones, like Kamui Cosplay or Yaya Han even. And it turns out great. It looks fantastic. My understanding of it is, yeah, it's a thermoplastic or thermal plastic, so it's really hard when it's solid. So it seems like that wouldn't be that comfortable, whereas foam has some give. And so the idea is that whatever cosplay I make, I'm always thinking about how comfortable am I going to be, and can I be at a Comic-Con all day and wear this thing without any sort of struggles or feeling like death, you know? Like I want to be able to last a whole day at a Comic-Con. And so another thing, just simple things like making sure I have a way to carry my phone and wallet, you know, so I make sure that I have pockets or at least some sort of thing that will carry my stuff. Yeah.
That's also important because there has to be a practicality component too, yes. Where I've seen cosplays and like I make this joke about Superman cosplay, like you've seen a drawstring bag, right?
Yeah.
And I made this joke, and I've said it to so many Superman cosplayers. I said, so why don't you have a drawstring bag right behind your cape and figure out
That's
a
a
way how
great
to
idea. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
nobody's going to know. And then all your stuff could be in there, and now you don't have to worry about, your wallet. It's not like Batman has a utility belt and
Yeah, you've got to think about those things. You really do. I mean, I know there are some cosplayers who they commit to the project and they don't really worry about those things. And their cosplay looks great. But practicality is a big one for me. I need to make sure that it won't kill me to wear it all day, and that I have places to put my stuff. Yeah.
And then obviously, since you already mentioned it, let's talk about Punisher from Marvel. So obviously, we sort of spoke about the vest building, but what was the inspiration behind the Punisher and wanting to commit to the Punisher and that stuff? Because obviously, the Punisher is a key player in Marvel. Between the Netflix stuff that came out, obviously Civil War, where the Punisher steps up major, the fact that he had a crossover with Archie, Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But that's a whole different discussion for a whole different day. The Archie crossover. If I'm just saying,
I didn't even know that actually.
I'm still confused.
Wow.
I'm still confused. But obviously, what was that like that you had to do the Punisher? Because obviously, it is a sought after character. A lot of people do it, but everybody has a different take on it.
Yeah, for sure. What's funny is I'm not even a huge like firearm enthusiast or anything like that. That's not I know some people like the Punisher for that reason. That's not my appeal. I think what drew me to the Punisher is similar to what drew people to Batman. Is that here you have someone who's going up against characters with powers. Someone who doesn't have powers themselves, but has to use their resources to make do and to try to make the world a better place. Now, the Punisher is a darker character because he kills the villains. And of course, that can get kind of controversial. But at the end of the day, when I think of what makes the Punisher interesting, is that he's willing to fight these bad guys on their terms. Like he's going in against some really evil people and saying, all right, it's time for your reckoning, and whereas in a Spider-Man comic, he'll tie them up in the web and they'll be hanging from a telephone pole and the cops will catch them. The only difference is in the Punisher's universe, the cops may be corrupt and let the criminals out. And then you have this cycle going again. And also, I think the Punisher has sort of this tale of not allowing the villains to bully you or to put you in a situation to where you can't fight back. But I think a lot of heroes do that too. So it's not totally unique to the Punisher.
And then obviously this was very cool for you to build this cosplay because obviously the vest was very particular. And I think it's safe to say that this might have been a step above where your skill sets were at the time. And I'm sure that there was a bunch of growth that came out of that. I think is, and correct me if I'm wrong at any point.
No, that's fair. In 2018 is when I first started working with foam. And the Punisher vest was my first project. Since then, I did want to get something more authentic. And there's JDS Props is a prop maker who makes movie quality props. And I really wanted to have one because I thought that, I'm happy with the vest I made, but I also want something to really showcase this character. So I did go ahead and get one from him. I haven't used that in a while, but it's nice to have. As someone who's 37 years old and I have a little bit of funny money, that I put away for these things, I pick and choose what I want to add to my collection. And so that was definitely one thing I added. I also got a lightsaber last year. I really wanted that for my collection. It was expensive, but it was worth it to me.
So obviously we talk about both those things. Obviously Disney is taking your money. So that's a safe assumption right there. But What is that like though, to have like real props and have that, and obviously you build something so you understand the appreciation of building it, but then you're saying, hey, I want this as a cosplayer, and then I'm going to piece together parts of this and build parts of that, because I'm very open to the idea that you should commission out what you're not good at.
Absolutely.
I never built a logo in my life. My logo is standing up top in one of the corners. I didn't design that. I hired somebody to do that because I'm not an artist. I can speak, I can interview people, but obviously, what is that like to have something that is that quality? Because it's nice when you afford things that are that quality. You also appreciate building it at the same time because you built your first one. And so it's kind of a cool thing for you in many ways.
It's a great way to honor other artists, really. I know that there are some cosplay purists out there who say you have to build everything. All right, build even your shoes. Like, just build everything. And I'm more forgiving on that. I think that cosplay is such a wide spectrum, from people who are buying all their materials or everything made to the people who make everything, and then those who are in between. And I think there's nothing wrong with any approach to cosplay, as long as you give credit to where you got it from. For example, my next character is going to be a Batman animated series Two-Face, prison escape version. And so I bought some Zentai suits. I bought one that was like light blue, and I bought one that was like a kind of a tan color based on my skin tone. And I knew that I'm not a great sewer. My focus is more on props rather than actual clothing. So Mayday Cosplays is a local cosplayer here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and she sews and she does a really good job. And so I talked to her and said, hey, I got these two suits. I need them to be sewn together halfway down the middle, and I say, can you do this for me? And so when I get the cosplay all finished and ready to go, I'm going to give her credit for that in all my photos and everything, because it's a way to honor each other. And it shows that cosplay doesn't have to be a solo project. It can be more of a community-based project too.
And I think that's one of the things.
Yeah.
As I was saying, I think that's one of the things that we're about to get controversial, where a lot of top cosplayers and a lot of women cosplayers who are making a lot of money right now in it, and there's nothing wrong with that and good on them, but I feel like when they miss the point of what cosplay is supposed to be fun. Most people who are cosplaying are doing it as a hobby. They're enjoying it. It is fun for them. And I think that's something that has been a big problem in cosplay for quite a few years now. And so I think that what you're saying is saying, hey, I just want to cosplay. You're doing this as a hobby. You enjoy being the character, getting cool photos. People saying, oh, that's awesome. And I'm sure that you appreciate when people say, hey, can I take your photo? Because obviously they're thrilled about it. And you're doing it because this isn't your job. Much like me.
I'm actually a teacher.
Much like my job is not podcasting in any stretch of the imagination. I'm doing because I enjoy doing it, and I find that it's an interesting thing to do, and it's very much a hobby for me that I would like to turn into a side hustle. But I think that's one of the biggest problems in cosplay right now, is that there is this divide, and I think everybody has forgotten that, look, this is meant for everyone. I used to cosplay characters, anime characters. I bought my cosplay off of eBay. And I didn't give the person credit because it was a generic cosplay. It's to some degree that they tailored slightly and they just hiked up the pants a little bit, because the pants were maybe like 3 inches longer than I was at the time. But again, I enjoyed myself and I had a great time as who I was. Obviously, I don't do it anymore. I'm beyond cosplay now. It's not my style. But I think that's something that sort of has happened in many ways in the community. And I think this is why I like talking to people who have less than 15,000 Instagram followers, because they're still in that moment. Versus somebody who has 600, 800,000 followers, they are now a business.
Yeah. There are some cosplayers who make it that big that I still really respect, and they can make a business out of it. Like I mentioned, Yaya Han or Kamui Cosplay. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but these cosplayers, you know, they share the artwork and they can make money out of it. And you know what? If someone can make money off of cosplaying, good for them. You know, I don't hate
I'm a capitalist.
that.
I am a greedy capitalist. And if anybody knows my business dealings, I make money selling comic books.
Yeah.
And I'm a comic book investor. I'm an alternative investor. So I cannot complain about people making money. That's not what I'm saying. But
Oh yeah, I don't think you are. No, I know that. But here's what I will say, and I think what your point is getting at is that I think for some people, the further they get into the money making aspect of it, the less fun it seems. I mean, I can't speak on that because I'm not making money off cosplay. But if I was, it would no longer feel fun. You know what I mean? Like for example, last year, 2020, I didn't get a whole lot done. But if it was my business, I would have been forced to create this artwork that I really maybe didn't want to do. And so then the artwork suffers for it. And so I think that's the danger of monetizing cosplay, is that now you're forced to take a piece of art and make it really just a money-making product, you know.
I would imagine that some of the people that even you respect and I enjoy what they do have been in that circumstance. I mean, if you look at Resident Evil 8 and that entire situation, what happened with that, it's complicated. But I don't want to dive too much into this because it's really controversial. And we're going down a rabbit hole that's not good. And obviously, I think I think it depends on the people. And there are people that I respect that have businesses, but they're also decent people beyond cosplay. And then there's just people just in every profession who are just not decent, but they're good at cosplays. And I think that's what it comes down to in a lot of ways, is that where were you before and what type of person who you are is where I think it all comes down to with this.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's, obviously I do want to talk about the Punisher though, because you did Christmas Punisher too, I think.
Yeah, I have a Christmas Punisher, and it's going back to like what I mentioned earlier about taking a character and putting a spin on them, and that can be fun. Yeah, there's something to be said for cosplaying a character exactly how the source material presents it. But there's also some fun in taking a character and shifting them into a different element.
I love it. I went to a Christmas con in December, and I did a Christmas anime panel, and there was Christmas stuff going on, and there were some Christmas cosplays. It was in December. It was snowing in Washington, D.C., and it was one of the most fun panels and cons I've ever been to. There was like half the people there, and it was amazing. And I love Christmas cosplays. I love Christmas comics in general. I find them to be fun. I find it to be funny. I like the campaigns that were involved in your Punisher thing. I like how he was sort of wearing a vest, and he was obviously in a red shirt, and he was like Santa Claus-esque. And so what is that like? Because you can't do that in the middle of July, but it's fun to throw that up in December.
Yeah, it's kind of like, have you ever played Overwatch?
Oh yeah, I love Overwatch.
Yeah, it's like skins on Overwatch. They always come up with like these seasonal skins, and you have your base look, but then you can also like have fun every once in a while and mix it up. And then when the season's over, you go back to your other look or you go into a new one. But I view it kind of like that, is like putting a spin on a character based on the season. It's just really like a new skin for that time period. Yeah.
And then getting out of the Punisher, but staying in the dark element of things. Spider-Man North.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite ones. Now, that's one actually where, trying to think about it, I didn't make anything for that cosplay. Like that is all like here's the only challenge there was I had to find different pieces that worked for me.
But that's a challenge in its own right, and that's a skill set. This is something that I think people don't understand, is that you can legitly go, and I could go to 10 cosplayers and issue them a challenge, and they would all approach it differently. And you could have what I guess I'm going to dub here, I'm sure there's a better name for it, but almost a piece together cosplay, where the challenge here is not to go build anything. You cannot sew anything. You cannot modify anything. maybe you could cut something and do that. Maybe minimal sewing we could add in there. But you have to go find the hat. You got to go find the mask. You got to go find the jacket. And that's a skill set to find that stuff and also find it affordable.
That's the key. So for Spider-Man Noir, I put a budget on it for myself, and I was thinking like, okay, I need to find pieces that work within my budget. I need to find things that are as close as possible to what the character actually looks like. It wasn't like a prefabricated costume. Everything was its own element that was sort of like picked from different stores and online retailers and slapped together. And at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy with how I did it. And again, this is one cosplay I didn't make a single thing for. I just went on a scavenger hunt basically and said, okay, I need to find these pieces.
And so this is why I like it, because I didn't know if you made it. I didn't know if you made parts of it. Obviously, I was pretty sure you didn't make the hat. I thought that was a safe bet. If you did the hat, I would have been thoroughly impressed. I'm just going to throw it out there. But, or if you made the Rubik's Cube, that would have been great. If you made the Rubik's Cube, that was the only thing you made out of it.
I actually could make a Rubik's Cube out of foam. It wouldn't be functional, but I could make a Rubik's Cube out of foam. But why? Here's the other question you have to ask yourself. Why spend that much time and money to make a Rubik's Cube when I can go buy one for $8? I don't know. It just depends on who you ask.
I'm just saying it would have been really funny if you said I didn't make anything but the Rubik's Cube.
You know what? I think maybe I should make a Rubik's Cube now, just to say I did.
But I love it. It went to, obviously the joke Into the Spider-Verse is the Rubik's Cube with Spider-Man Noir.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously he's dark. He's like, I don't understand it, but I will. It is like the line. And then it's a great line. It's a great movie in so many ways. I happen to have an Ultimate Fallout 4 comic. I actually have 2 of them. No, they are not for sale. I am throwing that out there right now. And if they are for sale, you're going to pay like $1,200 a piece for both of them. And it's worth every penny. It's worth every penny. There's a comic debate going on with the ASM, I think like 351 or 129, I should say, verse Ultimate Fallout 4, which is a whole debate. And if you go into a comic book group, it's like literally 9,000 posts and still going on. It's amazing. But obviously, how is this received? Because this is a very cool cosplay in a lot of ways.
Thanks. Well, sorry, what's the question? I think I missed the question somewhere.
So how is this received? Because
received, yeah.
Spider-Man Noir. It's awesome, and obviously people really got into the Spider-Verse. And what's crazy about the Spider-Verse is that it was the movie that nobody needed, but everybody wanted. Yeah. And it's very much a cult movie now, where in the box office it did okay, but on Netflix and on Disney and on Sony's streaming service, and even when it came out in all the box stores and on Amazon, it's done really well. And it's crazy, and we're getting a sequel like in a year.
I think for me, when I first saw the movie in the theater, right before, I was like, I probably won't like this that much, because it's animated. I don't know. I've always been a sucker for the live action versions of characters. But then I saw the movie and I was like, this is fantastic. It had a lot of heart. It had a great story. It was a really good movie. It's not just animated. It was a good movie to me. And so, of all the characters in there, I thought Spider-Man Noir sort of fit like my sensibilities in terms of jokiness and it was kind of a goofy character, but also really cool looking. Black is like one of my favorite colors. I wear black all the time. But anyway, so I was like, Spider-Man Noir, this is a great character. I want to put them together. And I knew going into it that I wasn't going to make anything really. It was just going to be collecting pieces. And that was good for me because at the time that was coming off of a big build, and I didn't really want to have to do another big build, especially that would incorporate sewing, because I'd have to, that would have been much more costlier actually to try to put everything together, especially since my sewing skills are not that great. But anyway, how it was received was, the only way I can tell is Instagram is sort of like my art gallery. And I just put what I think are some of the better shots of my characters on Instagram. And I try not to only measure things by likes, but the reality is that Spider-Man Noir was shared a lot and got a lot of likes. So I could tell that people thought that my interpretation of the character was either pretty accurate or they really enjoyed it. So I was pretty happy with that.
And obviously, Instagram can be good, it can be bad. But what I found with Instagram is that if you're getting a bunch of likes on something, it usually means that you're going in the right direction, or people didn't even know something existed. Because I've had on Instagram that people got like 500 likes, and I'm like, they're like, this exists to me. And like, I asked DMs, I have like 50 DMs of people saying, this book exists. And the book is like $3 on eBay, which is crazy. They're like, this is awesome. So obviously, I like Instagram as a judge, more so than Facebook, more so than Twitter, because especially with cosplay, and this is how I find cosplayers, is I go through Instagram and I either look at no likes or a lot of likes, depending on what's happening.
You know, I try not to get too caught up in how many likes am I getting and things like that. You know, I'm a little older, so for me, it's just like, I don't know if it's like how should I describe this? Maybe a slight disconnect there. And I have no judgment on anyone who is focused on that, because that's how they can tell. But the reality is, I do like Instagram because it's great for visuals, for visual media. And the reality is, if something does get a lot of likes, then it tells me that, okay, this was being noticed. And it is rewarding in a lot of ways as being an artist, however you are an artist, to know that it's reaching people. And when you see a like, you know that it's reaching someone. And that for me is rewarding. So I don't know, maybe I'm like somewhere in between then.
So I'm 28, so I'm caught in a weird position because obviously what I want is I want people to see what I'm doing and hear what I'm doing and pay attention to what I'm doing. But at the same time, I also know sometimes I got to tell my audience what they want. There have been interviews that nobody was watching, and legitimately 3 years later, it was like, this is great. And so it's complicated with what's out there, and likes can be deceiving and a variety of other things. But obviously, I do want to stay on to the Spider-Verse because you did Peter B. Parker as well. And you did him, and that's kind of the image I use for Facebook in a lot of ways. So what was that? Because it gets complicated because I don't know. There's certain photos, I'm not too sure if you're Peter B. Parker or if you're Spider-Man Noir, and there's a whole Spider-Verse group and all that stuff too is in there.
So I tried to put that in the description. So one of my friends, he was. Oh, yeah, okay. So fair enough. I tried to put that in description on Instagram. So I did create a Peter B. Parker off of my old Spider-Man costume. I got the jacket and the sweatpants and everything. And there's a photo of me as Peter B. Parker. Well, I haven't done a legit photo shoot of that yet in that costume. But in the local Albuquerque cosplay community, some of us got together and did a Spider-Verse shoot. And we needed someone to be Peter B. Parker. But I said, well, I want to be Spider-Man Noir. So I got one of my friends who is not a cosplayer, but kind of looks like Peter B. Parker, to wear essentially my costume and showcase it out there in those group photos. But I'm going to do my own Peter B. Parker here pretty soon, hopefully, because it's as an older cosplayer, I can relate, you know.
And so what is that like for you to have a Spider-Verse group? Because group cosplays can be very nice at a con. You even having one person to bounce off of, people instantly get it. Especially, I mean, Spider-Verse sells it real quick, but if somebody sees Peter B. Parker, they might not get that it's Peter B. Parker versus Peter A. Parker. I don't know if Peter Parker's initial is an A, but for all intents and purposes, obviously somebody might not get that you're Peter B. Parker, but if they see you as Spider-Man Noir, they're going to get it immediately. So what is that like to have that bouncing off? And also, when there's 4 people playing from Into the Spider-Verse, or there's Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy or Spider-Man and Mary Jane, it creates a very different emotion and connection than just if Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy is walking around without a group.
Sure. I think cosplay can be a very community-driven activity. And so I have the most fun when I am doing group activities with, like we're doing group shots, or maybe we go to a con as like a theme, like all of us Spider-Verse people maybe get together on a Saturday at a convention. It's a lot of fun because you get the camaraderie of working with other people. And so for me, I would actually prefer to be part of a group as opposed to a solo character. But a solo character is fun too. Now, you mentioned something about being recognized, and that's true. I think cosplayers have to decide how recognizable they want their character to be. Are you choosing a character that everyone's going to recognize? Are you choosing something that only a specific subculture is going to recognize? Are you making your own original creation in which nobody may recognize, which is a gamble in itself? So for me, I try to choose characters that there's at least something that can be recognized. So take, for example, post-apocalyptic Waldo. Most people can identify what Waldo is or who Waldo is.
I can't. I never found it.
Yeah. So if I make him post-apocalyptic, maybe no one has seen that before. Yeah, I just got that. Maybe no one's seen him as post-apocalyptic before, but at least they know the base character of Waldo, and that's the key.
And that's something that also I think is very important when you're doing a mashup, that there's some elements. So I have a friend, Labanak. Labanak does Christmas Ruby. So Christmas Ruby is Ruby Rose in a Christmas version. It's very recognizable because of the scythe, and there's elements of Ruby out there that you can see in Christmas Ruby. But then you could do something that is so far out that somebody's like, I can't think of an example. I'll throw an idea. You could do a mechanized version of My Little Pony that somebody might take them a minute or two to get. Versus because it's now further out there, and that there's such elements that I think somebody would get a mechanized version of My Little Pony real quick. I think that's a bad example, but I think the idea is that when you're doing stuff like that, though, because I've seen cosplays where people just didn't get it immediately, and then when you say, they're like, oh, I get it now. And so obviously it's very interesting, or even mashups where you're combining two characters together can be risky, or it could be somebody gets it immediately, like, oh, I get it completely. So it's very interesting in that regard. But I think post-apocalyptic Waldo, everybody gets it because they see the red pin stripe, which is the trademark of Waldo.
Yeah, and that's the key, is that for me, if you're going to do a mashup or put your own spin on something, you've got to have something recognizable. I still want my character to be recognized immediately. I don't want them to have to sit there and scratch their head and be like, what was that I saw earlier? No, I want them to get it right away. And so in order to do that, you can't lose any of the core elements. Like Waldo still needs his cap. He still needs the striped shirt, still needs blue jeans, and then you can go from there. I have a friend who he wanted to do a gender bend on the MCU Scarlet Witch, Wanda. And he was giving me ideas, or he was sending me pictures of these ideas. And it was okay, but he didn't have the core element, which is that headpiece, that iconic headpiece that she wears. And I said, without that, no one's going to know that you're a gender bent, Scarlet Witch. So I think with any sort of unique interpretation of a cosplay, you have to have recognizable elements, or else it's just not going to be recognized. And that's okay, but you have to be understanding that your audience may not get it.
And then obviously it sort of brings us into talking about Star Wars, because you're building a semi-original type cosplay, and there's a lot of people who do their own Mandalorian merch stuff and a variety of other things. Bounty hunters, obviously the Mandalorian. What is it? Alpha Bounty Hunter Alpha just came out, or something like that in the comic realm. I have it. I have it in my room in my house right now. I just haven't read it yet. I'm a little busy, so I'm really unprepared here. But what is that like? Because Star Wars can be tricky in that way, because you have certain elements of Star Wars where somebody might not get what species you are. But if you have a certain type of helmet, for instance, you're like, okay, you're a Mandalorian merc, or you're a bounty hunter, or you're in the Star Wars universe. I don't know where you're in the Star Wars universe, but like, what is that like for you building that? Because if you have a particular type of gun, there's and I know you're not a gun enthusiast, but there is a difference between a Star Trek gun and
absolutely.
a Star Wars gun. There's a big difference.
Very true. Very true.
So what is that like when we're dealing with that?
So this idea that I have, this concept of the Twi'lek bounty hunter, I know that this is probably going to be one of my least recognizable cosplays, because number one, it's not a specific character. It's a generic version of an alien species that's within Star Wars. And number two, only Star Wars fans are really going to know what a Twi'lek is. And so anybody who's seen Star Wars or is a Star Wars fan will recognize the iconic headpiece for sure. But then they won't know which character it is because I made up the character. And so that's always a gamble when you're a cosplayer. But here's the trick. Like you mentioned, the blaster. I have a blaster, and it's just straight up from Star Wars. It was an old Nerf gun type thing that I painted and got it, looking to look more realistic. So the blaster should help. The headpiece will help, of course. And then the other aspects of the costume is really, and I think people appreciate it, everything else has to be done to the T. Like, I'm going to make a vest that's going to light up. I'm going to have battle damage on it. And so what the character lacks in being recognizable, it'll make up for in some of the skill that I'm putting into the actual costume. And so while they may not recognize the character, they'll be able to say, wow, look at the detail on this thing. And that's what I'm going for, hopefully, is that they can appreciate the level of work that I'm going to put into it.
And obviously, when you get into Star Wars is a massively complicated entity. There's a reason why, what's going on with it. The whole investor's paradise in its own way. It's also an investor trap as a comic book guy. And Star Wars, I don't know if you know who Kitty Quinn is, but she had an incident with Mandalorian Merc stuff. And the Mandalorian Merc organization is insane. And they are very gatekeepers of what they do. And the requirements to become a Mandalorian Merc is beyond complicated. So it's good and bad in cosplay. There's a lot of merit in what they do. There's also a lot of destruction that they do as well. And I've just heard both sides of it. And so
so this is one thing that it's not really what I'm worried about, but I'm thinking about is that now I'm branching into Star Wars. So this Twi'lek, I'm going to have a bounty hunter version, and then I'm also going to make a Sith Lord version of it. And that's sort of my greater scheme of my Star Wars cosplaying. And so I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he said, well, if this looks good enough, maybe you can join the 501st, or some of these official groups that some of these Star Wars cosplayers have. Well, I'd be, if they asked me to be in, I'd be honored. Of course I would. But at the same time, you also it's tricky territory to navigate because it is very structured. It seems like it has to reach a certain look or else you can't be part of the club, so to speak. And I get kind of nervous about gatekeeping in art form, not just in cosplay, but anything,
It's very complicated, and I'm not a cosplayer, but I've just heard multiple scenarios and situations, both good and bad. And personally, I have no stake in it. And I'm the first person to say it, but given that I've been interviewing cosplayers for the last 7, almost 8 years now, and what I've heard, what I know about the industry, it's beyond complicated in its own right. So it is very tricky. But what I find with Star Wars is that honestly, most people don't really care. It's just that those groups are very, very specific on what they want, and they hold you to a T, and they kick out members left and right when things go away. And it's beyond confusing. And again, though, I have no desire to be part of their group at any which way. I'm not a cosplayer, so I personally don't care what they do. I just know that people that I know have been, treated very poorly.
And that's a shame, because whether it's in something more official like that, or if it's just a local group, cosplay and anything like that with Star Wars and so forth, it should be a community that embraces one another instead of excludes one another. And as far as I know from the 501st, it seems very official. It seems awesome. It seems like they have great people there. I haven't really heard a lot about the bad necessarily, but I always have that skeptic voice within my head saying, well, if someone doesn't look a certain way in terms of how they've made their cosplay and they can't be part of that group, then what does that mean for the art form, for people in that situation?
I also think, because obviously I'm very different. It's public that I walk around with crutches. There's a reason why I don't cosplay, because it doesn't really work in that way. And also when I'm at a con, my objective is different. I'm more on the panel side. I'm more on the business side of this stuff. And I'm more on the relations side for my podcast, comic book investing, and also on the education side, where I'm a big old school anime historian type of guy. And then partially because of my disability, and it's what I'm interested in. So I am very well aware of what it looks like when you're a student because of how you look. It's a reason why I am not too, that I agree where I don't like that. And it's unfortunate, because I know that if I was to cosplay and I'm on crutches as a stormtrooper, I would not be in their group. I have a pretty good position, and I like to think, because I am not quote unquote up to their standard despite my skill set. And
see, that's messed up. Anybody, regardless of your ability or disability or gender or sex or orientation,
that's how I view it. So I don't know if that's their official position, but given how they run their organization, that is how I view it. Now, I could be completely wrong, but just from what I hear, and they're not going to make a public statement like that, but if you look at their group, they've never had to deal with that position. And it raises questions. And it's not just their group, it's collective, a lot of things. And I like to think that in 2021, and I've seen cons make a lot of changes on how they run and how they are, being more and more accepting. But at the same time, it's very concerning in that regard. But and I don't like gatekeeping.
Absolutely. I come from a position of privilege, in a lot of different ways, and I understand that, and I think that cosplay should be a safe community where inclusiveness is the key. If someone wants to cosplay, then they should be able to do it, and they should be embraced regardless of anything, any factor you can think of. They should be embraced. That's the way I view cosplay.
I don't even view it from a position of privilege. I view it that if somebody builds a cosplay that is not their best work, but it's their first work, they should not be ridiculed. Rather, they should be uplifted. It's one of my biggest complaints about 2020, and partially why I got into doing this and started interviewing cosplayers, especially people with less than 15,000 Instagram followers, is that a lot of the big names all throughout 2020, and I'm about to get controversial again. A lot of them just shut down for 6 months. And I'm saying to myself, like, if you're a leader in this sector, you should be out there fronting cosplay when every con is shut down, when people are legitimately suffering. People use this as an escape. People use this as therapy. And there was a bunch of people that didn't come out and didn't deal with the problem. And so I'm going to quote mental health, and I'm not bashing anybody for mental health here, but if you have 1 million followers on Instagram and you're in a position where you can uplift somebody who has 10,000, and that, you know, you can add more of a positive light, you don't have a legal obligation, but you have an obligation to your community. I would make the argument on. And that, you know, and then they came back out come December, January, and now they're sort of full back and forth, and it's the upper echelon, you know. And now I'm saying to myself, like, I sort of lost respect for a bunch of people out of that, because I'm like, I went out there as a nobody, giving people at least some venue to promote themselves in the middle of probably the worst nightmare and problem of our lives. I would say, you know, the worst pandemic of our lives. I think COVID has been 15 months of shutdown. I think that's a pretty safe thing. So that's how I view it, at the very least, is that I was out there doing something. Whether maybe I only reached, you know, 20,000 people, but 20,000 is better than zero.
You know, there's something that I do when I'm not creating content, you know, like cosplays that I'm photographing and putting up on Instagram. In my story, I always, every day, I try to share a few cosplays that I respect and see and I like or admire for whatever reason. And I share those on my story. And, you know, it's just to raise awareness to these other cosplayers that are out here, and hopefully they get some love, you know, and they get, you know, some sort of following, and I'm just trying to share what other people are doing too. And now if I were in a position to where I had 1 million followers, let's say, I would still be doing the same thing. In fact, I'd probably do it more because I know it'd be more helpful to the cosplayers who want to get seen, but there's just so many of us, not everybody does get seen, you know.
And that's my biggest complaint with the cosplay community. And obviously, I'm on a different side of all of this, where it would have taken 5 seconds out of somebody's day twice a week to do this, and it would have made a massive difference. And I think it speaks more about who they are rather than about the community. And I'm just hoping that people are waking up a little bit in this sector. But you know that's how I feel, and that kind of leads me into where I want to go now. Where do you think everything is going with cons and all that stuff? Because now things are starting to come back, and obviously June, July, August is going to be a very aggressive 3 months of cons. I know I can't even speak.
Albuquerque.
Yeah. I can't say that apparently. I know 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks, right? You guys have a con.
That's a controversy too. I might as well just say it. I don't care. I don't go to that con. It's not for me. I don't really like some of the controversy that's surrounding it. And if anybody wants to find out for themselves, they can go online and just Google Albuquerque Comic-Con controversy, and you'll see why. You know, for legal reasons, I don't know if I can get sued, so I don't want to go too far into. But I just think
is this LH? Is this LH by any chance?
LH?
Is this LH?
I don't know what is LH. I'm not sure.
Is this? I'm trying to find code words here. What was there a table issue maybe?
There's been several issues with some of the things that people who are involved with that con have said and done, and so I no longer go to that.
I'm going to ask a question because I actually don't know what happened. Was this a comic creator issue or is it a con management issue? Because
it's a con management issue.
Oh, okay, then it's not LH. That's a different discussion completely.
Oh yeah, I don't even know who that is. But anyway, no, this is about This is about that con specifically, and I just choose not to go. But there's another con in town that I really like, and I hope that they can come back, and that's the New Mexico Comic Expo. And that one is legit, and they put a lot of hard work into it, and I really respect the guys who run it. Yeah.
So where do you think cons are going? Because obviously,
yeah,
I have a lot of friends in it, and Travis Gibb was just at a con sitting in the Scout booth, which is a comic company, and what he said to me, and the reason I'm bringing it up, and he said it live, is a lot of people had their list of books they were wanting and the merch they wanted, and that was it. They weren't really interested in spending more money than they needed to spend, and it was a harder sale to buy merch. And so everybody sort of had their thing and had a battle plan. And so I don't know if you've been to a con yet or you're going to a con soon, where do you think that's going? Because obviously cosplay is a little bit different. And also cosplay is very much an intimate thing. You know, when I want to take a picture with you, we're not 6 feet apart. You know?
Yeah. So for me, I got vaccinated. I'm feeling pretty safe. I want to get back to a con as long as I know that it's still done with COVID still in mind in some ways. A con, this is the Comic-Con industry got hit hard because it's all about being in a closed space. I mean, that's really what it is. There's all these tables and people, and for cosplayers, you're all around each other. And that's part of the draw. It's fun. And now, the pandemic hit and it's going to look different. As far as I haven't been to one yet. And unless New Mexico Comic Expo comes back this year, I probably won't go to one this year. But next year I plan to hit the con scene hard. I want to go to as many cons as I can next year. And I'm ready to get back. And as long as it's done safely. Now, as far as the vendors there and the people who are actually, making a living off of the cons, I hope it works out for them. I hope that they're still able to make a living off of it because I'd hate to see the con scene die because of this.
I'll briefly explain a little bit about it, where there's 3 things to a con. There's panels, there's guests, and then there's the vendors. If the vendors aren't making money, they'll go to a con, they don't make money, they're not coming back for the next one or the one in 3 weeks. If the guests don't make their guarantees, the con makes up the difference, and then the con is going to rebook that guest at some point, or they might rebook that guest, but then less money is now coming into the con's position. Or if the con doesn't sell enough tickets, they might pay for that year, but then they might move to a smaller venue, or they're going to re-examine their business plan. And then, well, if all those things aren't working, then the next time they run it, and let's say the con, made $100,000 instead of $300,000, and then they run the next year, but the fans didn't have a good enough experience. The fans the next year aren't coming back, and so everybody has a vested interest in everybody doing well. Because if one of those things doesn't do well, it's going to affect the overall attendance, which then will affect the other things. And chances are either all 3 of those things are going to work one way or the other. One of those things is not going to fail, and the other 2 are going to be successful. All 3 of those things are going to go positive or negative at the same way because they are correlated entities. Sure. And so obviously I have a vested interest in my vendors doing well and my celebrity guests doing well because that affects the healthiness of the con.
Absolutely. I can see how it's all intertwined, the success of the different parts, it all needs to work together like synergy. And so for someone like me, I go primarily for cosplaying. I want to see the other cosplayers. I usually will either participate in a costume contest or something like that. I love going to the panels, of course.
And you pick up merch. Everybody does.
I pick up merch, but I don't pick up as much as some of my friends do. My friends will buy a lot, and I usually try to limit myself to like $100, because I need to, or else I'll go too crazy in there. I'll get too much.
But even the idea of you buying food and other things at a con
feeds into it. Yeah.
You don't realize how much money people spend. And people, you go to a con, just like that, you're spending $150, $200, just like that. And even that extra $25 you're spending has a whole economic consequence. I'm not an economic major. I just happen to like economics. And I know all about con economics. There's an article up on my website where your ticket goes to. And when you buy a ticket to cosplay, that covers a lot of different things. And if you were to actually piece out your ticket, it goes to about 13 or 14 different things. And so when you're spending $90, you have to divide that into 14 bucks times whatever's going on. And it's a whole economic, rabbit hole. But it's super fascinating when you understand it. And so obviously, and this is something that I think cosplayers don't understand, is that just because you're cosplaying doesn't mean that you want the vendor to fail or the guest to fail. And people might just go for cosplay, but you want that guest to do, if their guarantee is 50,000, they're going to do 100,000, because that means the con is healthy and your environment is healthy to continue to do what you want to do.
Absolutely. And so when New Mexico Comic Expo, first, they only had one so far, it was in 2019. I was sharing that event to everybody, not even just cosplayers, but to anybody, because I don't know the economics of it, but I do know that if they have low ticket sales, then they're probably not going to be around, And so I wanted this con to really build, because I think it can offer something really exciting to the city of Albuquerque, which isn't a huge city, when you put it in comparison to other parts of the U.S. But for New Mexico, it does all right. And so I was hoping that it would stay a strong con, and I think it will. But COVID set it back a little bit.
And so obviously, I'm sure we could talk about COVID for the next hour easily, but I don't want to do that because I think we're turning the corner. But,
yeah, I think so too.
But I do want to give you an opportunity to self-promote yourself. So obviously, where can people find you? Social media, things you're going to be at, Twitter, all that good stuff.
Sure. So really, it's only at Adam the Cosplayer, just like how my name is on the screen there, Adam_the_cosplayer on Instagram. That's the only place I really devote to cosplay. I also focus on writing, but that's more on my Twitter. And then Facebook is just whatever. I don't even know anymore. So cosplay, you just go to my Instagram, everything's there. I share cosplayers every day in my story. I post pictures that I have. I haven't done something in a while. I think the last one was the Spider-Verse shoot. But more to come. There's going to be some Star Wars stuff on the way. You're a DC fan, so my Two-Face animated series is coming soon. And then the con scene, I should be pretty heavy into it next year. I'm saving a lot of money this year so I can buy all the tickets next year to go to a ton of cons. Yeah.
And so on that note, and I've been saying it with every interview, you have to support indie. And what that means is that you have to, if somebody has a Patreon, buy me a coffee, a PayPal link, a Cash App link, support them economically. I think you have to buy me a coffee, right?
I have a coffee on there. I have yet to have a coffee. No one has bought me a coffee yet. But I made that thing so long ago. But the reality is I am a teacher, so I don't have a ton of money to devote to cosplay. So every little bit does help. If anything, it adds more foam to my arsenal.
Obviously, one of the things that I've been saying, and I'm going to reiterate it again because it is super important, is that if you like somebody, you have to support indie. And what that means is that if they got prints, buy me a coffee, Cash App, PayPal, all that stuff, foremost, because that goes a long way. But even going further off of that, and COVID has hit a lot of people economically. I personally have shored up a lot of assets of my own at this point because of COVID, and I'm also being very selective on how I spend my money, and I've done it for the last year because while we are turning the corner, things aren't out of the woods yet.
That's right.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff coming down the pipe that is the unknown. And it is better to be safe. And so obviously I don't want anybody to go into debt. to go buy you a coffee. Please take care of yourself, your house. Pay your rent, your mortgage. Super important to do. If you have debt, start paying that down. Wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband. Make sure your significant other is taken care of as well. Also, if you have kids, make sure they're taken care of. Make sure your pets are taken care of. Make sure you have electricity, food, water, shelter, all that stuff. And also make sure you have some money for the next month, because that is, as I say, we are not out of the woods yet. It is a long road to getting onto higher ground in my viewpoint. And it's also the unknown, as I stated. And, you never know. So obviously, if that's the case, you should be following people on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And also, you should be liking people's posts on Instagram. It legitimately is a click of a button, costs you nothing, and it actually means something. Because it affects the algorithm. It also lets people know that if you like their cosplay, they're going in the right direction. And also, commenting means something, because it obviously makes them feel good. And also, it helps the algorithm on Instagram. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Well, I just want to thank you, Andrew, for having me, and I really appreciate it. I think that this has been a really cool experience. I've never done one of these interviews before, and this was fantastic. You set the bar like way high. But yeah, this was fun. It really got me to think about cosplay and just everything involved with it, and I really appreciate what you're doing for artists.
Well, I am thankful that you came on, because as I said, I wanted to do this in March, and obviously I was waiting for I think your semester to end, and obviously that's where we are. And so on that note, I believe that is a wrap.
Cool. Thank you very much.